leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Nigel Farage. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
Yesterday, I handed over the reins of UKIP to Diane James. She's the new leader. In her first speech, she said UKIP was the opposition party in waiting. Could she be right? Could UKIP replace the Labour Party as the main opposition party by 2020? So whether you're UKIP, Labour, Tory, Green, Liberal Democrat, I want to hear from you. Tell me that it's complete nonsense, it's a pipe dream that UKIP's going to collapse, or tell me actually Labour's in so much trouble that UKIP could plug the gap. Plus, I gave my last speech yesterday as UKIP leader, and I'm going to share with you what I really think about the party, its future, and what needs to be done. So yes, I woke up this morning as the ex-leader, the former leader of UKIP, and I guess after all these years, it might take a bit of getting used to. Maybe not. It's going to be fun. I can do what I like now. Doesn't matter. I can even speak more freely than I did before because I was so constrained, wasn't I, as leader of UKIP? No, I personally feel a massive weight of responsibility off my shoulders, and that job has gone to Diane James. Remember UKIP, the misogynistic party that doesn't like women, and 75% of the votes went to female candidates in this leadership election. She's got a big job to do, but she set out very clearly that she believes the party's got the potential to become the opposition party in this country. Well, Labour's got a vicious leadership election going on at the moment. Any of you that have seen the debates can see that the two candidates are not exactly getting on very well. And it's also true that in the last general election, UKIP directly picked up over 1 million people who'd been lifelong Labour voters who'd switched to it. So I know people will say, well, of course, it's nonsense. I mean, it's impossible for UKIP to overtake Labour. But I would just say this. You know, this party was tiny. You know, all through the 1990s, into the noughties, we'd fight by-elections and get 1%, 2% if we were lucky. And we won a national election, the European elections of 2014. So the party's come a long way. The question is, has it run its course or could it go a lot further? Mark in Leicester is our first caller this morning. Hello.
Morning, Nigel.
Morning.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is congratulations on what you've done in the referendum. 25 years I've voted for Conservative, and the first time last year I voted for yourself and your party. So, you know, that's very commendable. The thing is now, I see UKIP going forward, is you really need to be rolling out policies on everything else except what Europe are doing. You know, yes, you're getting there, and you've not finished the job yet getting us out of Europe. And I'm sorry, you've probably had enough of all the backbiting by everybody in your country and in your fellow MPs in sort of Europe. But they've got to start rolling out all the things. I don't know UKIP's policies on anything except getting out of Europe.
OK, Mark. Well, you made a comment about backbiting, and later on in this hour, I'm going to talk a bit about that and a bit about some of the internal problems. I mean, UKIP's not unique to that, obviously.
Sorry, Nigel, it's not just... I wasn't talking about internal problems.
Right.
I'm on about the whole country being like the press. I mean, the power of the press is unbelievable, which people don't realise. When UKIP were coming to the surface about 2 years ago, from being a small party you talked about earlier on, some of the scrutiny of like somebody who was just a little party member was scrutinised as being all sorts of different things, racist,
I know.
Everything.
I know. I mean, But Mark, if you challenge the establishment, you will always take some abuse. On the point about domestic policies, I would say this to you, that the 2015 UKIP manifesto, which was the first one any party had ever had independently costed, did put out a full array of policies. And I think what's really interesting, Mark, and perhaps gets us to this question of could UKIP become the main opposition party in Britain, is that so much of what we've campaigned on, Theresa May's now talking about. You know, we've been the party that campaigned on grammar schools, done it for years. She's now talking about it. We were the party who said the foreign aid budget was too high and not being well spent. Well, Priti Patel is now talking about dealing with it. And on issue after issue, minimum wage, for example. We argued for a long, long time, no tax on minimum wage. We've seen the thresholds going up. So I think, Mark, whether you heard about it or not, I think that UKIP's policies have been very successful in terms of shifting the centre of gravity in British politics. The question is, of course, will Mrs May deliver? I don't know. But Mark, no, thank you very much indeed for your call. Now, get involved. Follow Mark. Tell me what you think. Agree with me. Disagree with me. You can do it by calling 0345 60 60 973, or you can text to 84850 or tweet at LBC. And you can watch the whole of this show live at lbc.co.uk and on the LBC Facebook page and even on the LBC app on your phone. So if you want to have a look at something that makes you laugh, tune in. Peter in Wimbledon, what do you think? Could UKIP replace the Labour Party?
Never in a million years. A party of bigots and haters and hypocrites can be a credible opposition to the Conservatives.
Okay.
And you know it quite well. Your policies, Nigel, are based on hate. You don't offer any solutions. You praise or you prey on people's fears, and I don't know how can someone take you seriously. Before the Brexit vote, you stood in front of a poster which showing Syrian refugees escaping war-zone country, saying we are full. And what on earth that has to do with UK membership of EU? You're just opportunist and hypocrite. You married yourself to the EU national.
Right. Sorry, Peter. What's wrong with that? Is that bad then?
No. It's not. I mean, it's not bad. It's not a problem. It's just I can't understand. I'm still waiting for you or your successor to apologise to those people who suffered from rising racist crimes because of your behaviour before the Brexit vote. People are foolish to believe that you have solutions to their problems. You don't have any solutions.
Well, Peter, I mean, you've come up with a long list of charges here. So would you accept we're not misogynistic anymore? In that, as I say, 75% of our voters in the leadership election voted for a female candidate. So, do you think we've got rid of that one?
Well, you can say that you passed the first hurdle, but I'm just still,
okay.
I can't understand.
I'm getting somewhere.
All my friends and people who are listening to you, they cannot understand what were you doing standing in front of that poster.
Well, I'll come to that, Peter. I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Now, if you give me a chance, now, come on, give me a chance. Now, look, what happened yesterday, there was the UKIP conference, but in Bratislava, there was a meeting of 27 heads of state, okay? And there was a massive row going on. Why? Because Mrs. Merkel last summer said, as many of you as want to come to Europe we can cope, we can handle it. And what that poster showed were people crossing borders, rushing, as southern and eastern European countries started to put up borders, started to put up controls. And frankly, Peter, we can talk about genuine refugees. I have never, ever said that this country should not take its share of genuine refugees. But I think the problem is so many people that are coming are not genuine refugees. They are people, you could argue, seeking a better life. But surely we or the EU cannot cope with people in complete unlimited numbers. And I don't believe, Peter, that making that argument is racist. What do you think?
I just still can't put two together with regards to... I know there is an issue with Syrian refugees, and it's a problem not only UK, but the whole of Europe as such. But how can you claim that these people who are genuine refugees escaping war-torn country, and they are trying to save them, they're escaping for their lives, and you stood in front of that poster and you put in fear into the British people before the vote that these people are going to invade UK and we are full and so on. And then you change your policy after that. You said, look, we're not anti-immigration. We just want to have people from other countries as well to immigrate.
No, we've never ever. We've never ever.
You say,
we've never ever. Look,
you're against the EU immigration, and then on the other side, you're saying you're for other immigration from other countries.
Peter,
people apparently not good for you.
Peter, when I did the LBC head-to-head debate, which Nick Ferrari chaired, against Nick Clegg a couple of years ago, Clegg said, oh, Farage wants to pull up the drawbridge. He's against immigration. That's what UKIP stands for. We don't, in UKIP, want to pull up the drawbridge. We want to control who comes across it. And it strikes us as being pretty mad that you can allow in unlimited numbers of unskilled people whilst at the same time making it very much more difficult for skilled people from the Commonwealth or elsewhere to come into the country. And I, frankly, I think there may be some people like you who think it's racist to even talk about this subject. But I promise you, Peter, if you come to a UKIP meeting or look at UKIP candidates, you will see we are fully represented by members of every ethnic community. And I honestly, hand on heart, tell you that all these unpleasant words and names that get thrown at UKIP are simply not true. Well, please stay tuned. I will, later on in this hour, be revealing my thoughts on the direction of UKIP, on one or two of the things I think have gone wrong, on perhaps one or two of my failures as leader
UKIP's new
of
leader,
the party.
Diane James, says
this is a
LBC
party is the opposition party in waiting. Could she be right? Could UKIP replace Labour as the main opposition party in this country? So please get involved. Call me on 0345 6060 973 or text 84850 or tweet at LBC, and some of you have been doing that already. In fact, one tweeter says, your last caller is an example of a Labour supporter. They don't want the truth. They want their fantasy to be reality. UKIP is always more credible. But Samara Smith disagrees, and she says that UKIP will become irrelevant and disappear. It's a party full of people with extreme views. Most people in the UK are moderate and decent. I don't know, Samara. There may have been some people in that hall yesterday in Bournemouth who had unusual views. I have to say, most of them look pretty normal to me. So where's UKIP going? What's its potential? Good, bad or ugly? Tristan in Chichester, good morning.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Very well. What do you think?
Well, firstly, can I just quickly say thank you very much for campaigning so hard for all these years to get us out of the EU, because I'm one of the few young people that actually wanted us to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate you doing that for us. Thank you very, very much. The point I wanted to make on the question of UKIP becoming Britain's second largest party, I'm 18 years old and I voted Leave, but most of my friends, well, all of them but one actually, all voted Remain, and that's a trend you seem to see to a lot of young people. They all seem to be sort of liberal and left-wing, and obviously the future of Britain's political parties is a question about the future, and I don't see how UKIP can become the second largest party when all the young people and all the people who are sort of going to be the future adults are very liberal and left-wing, and I was just wondering what your take was on that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. However, a third of young people like you did vote Leave, so it wasn't sort of 90% or anything like that, but a third did vote to Leave. There's an odd thing here, Tristan, and the odd thing is this, that it's the youth in this country that supported our Remain side of the referendum argument, and yet, around the whole of the rest of Europe, it is the youth that are backing new political movements of the left and the right, and are saying, this doesn't work, we want something different. And one of my big regrets with the referendum campaign, looking back on it, I wish now we'd brought a couple of hundred students from Greece over to this country, sent them out round the sixth form colleges and universities to say, just look at what the EU has done to us. Yeah, it hasn't just impoverished us, it's taken away our democratic rights. And I think that's the problem, Tristan, is that I think the way the EU is being taught in schools, worse still, at universities, and they were completely partisan during the election campaign. The university is telling people you must vote to Remain. And I just think, I've got a feeling, Tristan, that if young people get the counter-argument, which is that actually in the European Union you can't be democratic, you can't be free, you can't chart your own destiny, maybe, you and I will speak in 5 years' time and we'll find a lot more young people think we've done the right thing. At least I hope so.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, I'm at sixth form college and we got bombarded with pro-EU stuff from our lecturers and things. We're on a media course, it's got nothing to do with it, and they're just sort of indoctrinating us, and it worries me a bit. I suppose we need to probably shake up the education system a bit, and
Tristan, I couldn't agree more. There is too much EU influence in further education in this country. I completely agree, and I would say well done to you for standing out against the crowd. Thank you. Next we go to Philip in Hammersmith. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. What have you got for me?
Sort of bringing it back to the question. First off, wanted to congratulate you on a really successful tenure as UKIP leader. I do disagree with a lot of basically all of your party's ideologies, but you have been a really effective politician, so congrats on that. So back to the question in hand. Yeah. I wanted to look back to the 2015 election because you're talking about this gap that was created by Labour, and you're thinking, can UKIP plug the gap and become the next sort of opposition party? The problem I saw with Labour's campaign in 2015 wasn't ideologically to do with the left. It was to do with Ed Miliband being far too weak in terms of being an opposition. I think the gap was created because of this sort of right-leaning sort of faction within the left that was started by Tony Blair that's just too indistinguishable from the Tories. And that's what's happened. That's why we've got this huge plug towards Jeremy Corbyn now, because there's this vacuum that people want something that really strongly opposes the current party that's in power. I suppose the problem that I see with any success that you might have is that I don't believe UKIP is fundamentally different enough to the Tories. You're talking about Priti Patel, taking on your ideas about the foreign aid budget, the minimum wage threshold. A lot of your ideologies are too easily adapted to the Tory agenda that I don't believe that you could actually ever present a very strong opposition in Parliament.
Well, who's to say? I mean, at the moment, the Tories have a majority in Parliament, but it's not a very big one, is it? So if UKIP was to win a certain number of seats in 2020, who's to say they might be forced to work with the Conservatives and vice versa? I mean, what is interesting is that under Cameron's leadership, all of those things that Theresa May is talking about, he outright rejected. So this new Prime Minister is sounding a bit UKIP-y. I get your point entirely. However, it's very interesting. When Cameron made that famous Bloomberg speech in 2013 saying he changed his mind, he would give us a referendum, he did it in response to the rise of UKIP. And everybody said, well, now the Conservatives stand for the same thing that UKIP stand for. UKIP's finished. The fox has been shot, is what they all said. And actually, all it did was validate us and make us stronger because they'd legitimised, the Prime Minister effectively had legitimised, our main policy stance. And I would say this, if the promises on grammar schools and foreign aid and all the rest of it, if those promises, having raised expectations, don't get delivered, then UKIP can be strong. And on the first part of what you said about Labour, all I would say to you, Philip, is this. We've got this, you're right, almost a civil war in Labour, isn't there, between the Corbynistas and the Blairites, if you like. But who out of these leadership candidates is talking to the 50% plus of Labour voters in the Midlands and North who voted for Brexit? Surely that's their problem, isn't it?
It is, certainly. I think, obviously, Brexit is sort of a fundamental issue, and I think it's interesting that you bring it around to that. Sort of making out that you've legitimised UKIP by having a public support for leaving the EU. I'm personally against the European Union. I didn't vote in the referendum because it's too complicated an issue, I think, for me to tackle. But fundamentally, I think it's interesting that you talk about that because you're right. Certain ideas within UKIP have been legitimised by the referendum. What hasn't been legitimised is the fundamental image of hate politics and racism and blaming, things that aren't related to immigration on issues like that. And I think it's interesting because you're correct. You've been legitimised in terms of your stance on the EU. Other parts of your policy have been legitimised by, making it into things that Theresa May is now talking about. What hasn't been legitimised is this undercurrent of, really not very nice politics. And I think that's something that Jeremy Corbyn is standing against. I think it's something that a lot of people are now waking up to. And I think that any kind of strong opposition has to cut out that idea of hate because that's Philip, fundamental to... You
can think that, Philip, if you want to. But, I mean, remember, when I first started talking about immigration as a subject in 2004, I was told it was wrong and hateful to even discuss the subject. I mean, that is the extent to which Labour, I think, had tried to close down debate on this issue. But thank you for your call. And, if you are a Labour supporter out there, You know, you could tell me why you think UKIP could never, ever really bite into that Labour vote in a big way, or perhaps you are a Labour Brexit voter and not quite sure where to go next. James in Manchester, a Labour-dominated area. James, good morning. What do you think and see?
Good morning, Nigel. My hero. What do I think? First of all, very quickly, I'm a UKIP supporter and I voted Leave. You're quite right. I live in Salford, and I do think genuinely that UKIP have every chance of being the second party, so to speak, the opposition. In fact, there's an awful lot of people where I live who believe they already are. And in fact, if there was an election tomorrow, they wouldn't necessarily win, but they certainly would come in with a big vote. And can I just say quickly, up here in the north, I mean, I've never supported Labour. I used to be Conservative until Cameron arrived, and then I voted UKIP. Up here in the north, I feel very sorry for a lot of Labour supporters, the hardcore, what I call Labour supporters, because I feel they've genuinely been left abandoned in this abyss. Because on one hand, you've got Corbyn. I mean, I literally watch these debates on Corbyn and Owen Smith just for entertainment value. You've got Corbyn, who's not very strong, not strong character-wise, and is very wishy-washy what he wanted to do with the British public, whether keep them in or bring them out. So they're halfway in, halfway out. And then you've got Owen Smith, who's come from nowhere, who I believe is firmly on his own political career agenda, who, to me, I mean, as an onlooker, there's a great saying, a visitor for a mile can see for a while. A visitor for a while can see for a mile. And if you look at these things, when you don't support a particular party, you tend to spot a lot more than what you would if you supported them. And I watched Question Time with Owen Smith, and he virtually said to David Dimbleby, if I win and in the 2020 election, I am going to put us back into the EU.
I know.
You're out.
I know. And that's right, James. And you're one of those voters, you see. You're one of those voters up north who voted for Brexit that are, frankly, I think, being ignored. Yes, Owen Smith. Owen, who are you? Smith, I think, might work, because I hadn't really heard of him before this, I have to confess. Well, James thinks that. Others disagree. You know, John tweets in, UKIP is finished. A bunch of right-wingers that's run out of steam and now is history. You'll never replace Labour. Lots of different views. We'll continue with your calls in a couple of minutes. Plus, there's a lot of rumours circulating, swirling around the media and the internet that I went skinny dipping in Bournemouth ahead of the UKIP conference. Well, I'll let you know whether that's true or not after the latest news. It's LBC, it's 10:30, news time now with Moira Alderson. Well, as the former leader of UKIP, I sat there yesterday listening to the new leader of UKIP, Diane James, telling the party conference that UKIP was the opposition party in waiting. Could she be right? Could UKIP replace Labour as the main opposition party in this country? And Knock John tweets in and says, remember that just over 100 years ago, Labour was a new party. It took time to become a large party of the latter 20th century. Well, of course, that is right, and it was the Liberals who were the big party in those days, and very big rows in the 1906 general election with people saying to Labour candidates, don't stand because you'll split the Liberal vote and let the other lot in. Funny, isn't it? Political arguments very rarely seem to change. And River Magic tweets in and says, young Tristan, our previous caller, young Tristan is right. The majority of young people are left-wing. Thankfully, though, most of them grow up eventually. Well, we say the newspapers, there's lots of gossip that I might have done something truly extraordinary whilst I was in Bournemouth. Well, actually, on the Thursday evening before the conference, it was warm, humid, the thunderstorm, the dramatic lightning show hadn't quite yet arrived, and I was sitting out on the terrace overlooking what I think must be one of the most impressive beaches in the country. It's fantastic. It's also very shallow. It's quite safe. It doesn't have a very big tidal range. These are all my defences that I'm getting in here to show you how rational and reasonable I am. But no, at midnight, it seemed an amazingly good idea to me to go for a swim, so I did. But it wasn't skinny dipping. I did keep my underpants on. Do you know what? It was absolutely wonderful. Now, I'm not saying we should recommend people chuck themselves into the sea all around the place, but I can assure you it's not the first time I've done such a thing, and I intend to do it again. So I hope that deals with it. Funny, isn't it, what the newspapers want to talk about? Back to the main issue. UKIP, its future. Where's it going? What problems does it need to solve? Some of which I'll talk about a bit later on. But for now, we go to Greg in Redbridge. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. I think that UKIP can move more into an opposition, a stronger opposition. Some of that could be down to their common sense, successful politics, but a large part could also potentially be down to the sort of capitulation and failure of the Labour Party. I think it's all right for people in London and what have you, but what sort of pint-drinking, fag-smoking, white van man in Burnley looks up to someone like Emily Thornberry? You know, you've got someone like Emily Thornberry sort of ostracising, you know, people that put England flags outside of their house. You know, what person from up there is going to look at someone like Emily Thornberry speaking on Sky News and think this person represents me? Or Eddie Izzard. The Labour Party is in disarray because it doesn't know who it's speaking to.
Are you suggesting, Greg, that Eddie Izzard's pink beret is not some kind of secret weapon that could get the working classes voting Labour again in droves?
Well, it's just, I mean, he's so erratic. I mean, that occasion on Question Time.
Oh, don't remind me.
Well, exactly. And sort of, you know, Russell Brand, when you're on there yourself as well, you know, the people at the back. You've got such a broad base of Labour supporter, and that's why they're in disarray. But for some reason, UKIP seem to be managing it. There's this fallacy that UKIP only pick up Tory votes, whereas all the facts and data suggest otherwise. UKIP seem to be able to appeal to members of the Labour Party or former members of the Labour Party and the Conservatives.
And non-voters, Greg. Everyone forgets this. One of the reasons that the opinion pollsters got the growth of UKIP wrong in sort of 2012-13 is they couldn't see that nearly a quarter of the UKIP vote in some elections was coming from people who just simply had divorced themselves from the political process, and they saw UKIP offering policy solutions and got themselves back involved. And Greg, I think your comments about the sort of attitude and perhaps disdain or perceived disdain of the Thornberrys and people like that is right. Eddie Izzard on Question Time, I remember he just screaming at me, and Dimbleby, who's a good chairman, just sort of not being able to control this guy. But, Greg, let me tell you, I'm very grateful to Russell Brand because he's given me one of the enduring images of my time in politics that I'll never forget, and that is before we went on to film that Question Time episode, seeing Russell Brand standing at the doors of a studio having his chest hair combed by two of his assistants is not something I'm going to forget in a hurry. With that thought, we move on to Harrison in Basingstoke. Harrison, age 13, I'm told, Harrison.
Yep, indeed. Hi, Nigel. It's great to speak to you again. I remember speaking to you back in July.
I remember. Yes, you really rather stunned me back in July. So what's happened in your world since July? What's going on out there?
Well, I've been watching several of the Labour leadership debates, and all I've seen in my eyes, really, is two unelectable men from an unelectable party stood on the stage. Absolutely no reason for them to be there, to be honest. I mean, Corbyn, he's just, in my eyes, he's dangerous. I'd be worried to see him in office. And Owen Smith, well, he's just undemocratic, trying to overturn the Brexit debate, and I know that's something you will have thought about, Nigel, I'm sure, yeah. So, no, I just think the Labour Party have finished, really. I don't really see them having a future in government, even in opposition, to be honest. I
think they're in trouble, and I think, you're right. That's why what Diane James said yesterday was so interesting, because Labour really have, got a big problem. Tell me something. When did you start getting interested in politics like this?
Well, I'm not sure, really. It happened over time. I think it was 2 years ago now. I think it was probably 2 years ago when I started seeing. Actually, I started seeing your speeches in the European Parliament, and I actually watch them sometimes for entertainment because they're quite funny.
They're supposed to be very serious political commentaries, Harrison.
But it's just the way that what you say is it's true, but it's kind of saying it how it is, and that's something that I think is what we need in politics. And
what do your mates
I always say
think?
to my dad, wouldn't it be great if Nigel was Prime Minister?
And what do your mates think, Harrison? I mean, do your mates at school all think you're mad, or do they think you've got some interesting things to say? I mean, are they interested in this stuff or not?
Well, I'll tell you something. My left-wing teachers aren't particularly... they don't really agree with me half the time, and... Yeah, I know, they're just typical BBC watchers, Guardian readers.
Harrison,
yeah.
I tell you what, son, I have been opposed to reducing the voting age to 16. I've thought 18 was more sensible. But speaking to you again, do you know what? I might just be changing my mind. Brilliant. Terrific to hear from you. Have a great, great day. Wow. Next we go to Mark in Barnet. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. I don't know how I can follow that, really.
I know. He's amazing, wasn't he?
Well, Nigel, I'm a Brexiteer Tory, so I'm very happy at the moment with where we are. But, I do have some sympathies with UKIP, obviously. And I don't think you're a nasty party, and I don't subscribe to the fruitcakes idea that David Cameron put out there a few years ago.
And interestingly, Mark, just to make the point again, he did it on LBC, didn't he? It was an LBC show on which he said it.
I remember it well. And some of the nicest people when I was a council candidate a couple of years ago were Barnet UKIP among my opponents. But I just don't think you're going to be the next opposition party, because I think there's a massive divide between your activist base, like the people in Barnet UKIP, who are nice, decent people, and the factionalism of the front line. Now, what I mean by that, I'll just give you two examples. Peter Whittle, and I apologise if I'm about to criticise people you know personally, but Peter Whittle was basically, he just did not seem adequate as a London mayoral candidate. And in the recent leadership election, you passed up, for reasons that seem to me somewhat churlish, the opportunity to elect Stephen Wolfe, who I think would have been a much more polished performer. And you've gone for Diane James, who, with the best will in the world, I did watch her speech yesterday, was insubstantial and somewhat uninspiring. And I just wonder, Nigel, whether the front line of UKIP, the National Executive Committee and the various people on the front line are actually ready to go to that next level of professionalism, which you need.
You've raised an absolutely brilliant point. I've met UKIP Barnet before, and as you say, really sensible, good, honest, decent people. Actually, whatever they say about our party, most people out there, the grassroots, are just decent people who care a lot and get involved and engaged. But there have been problems at the top of UKIP, and I will, after the break, quite honestly tell you what I think about things. Coming up after 11, there's a new sort of Uber-style service offering patients a same-day appointment with an NHS GP, but it's going to cost you 50 quid. Should you pay 50 quid to see a doctor? Would you pay 50 quid to see a doctor if you were guaranteed to see them on the same day? Or do you think this is privatisation through the back door? Plus, I'm going to tell you everything. Spill the beans after this. It's LBC, it's 10:45. To remind you, you can watch the whole of this show at lbc.co.uk and on the LBC Facebook page and even on the LBC app on your phone. OK. Since the general election of 2015, I have been biting my tongue. I have been diplomatic. I have been holding back. I haven't said or done some of the things that needed to be done to solve some of the problems that exist in UKIP. Why? Well, I felt that fighting the referendum mattered more than dealing with the internal problems in the party. And whilst on the outside, the UKIP bonnet, may have looked clean, perhaps even shiny to some, underneath the engine, I'm afraid, has been breaking down. When Douglas Carswell defected to UKIP, it was a big moment. An MP, reasonably well known, joining UKIP, calling a by-election on a point of principle, which I thought was terrific, and then going back to his fiercely Eurosceptic Clacton constituency and winning that by-election. And, that was big stuff for us. Big stuff for us. We just won a European election. The momentum was really going. The European debate was being heard more clearly. But I'm afraid since the general election, it's been a very strange juxtaposition of Douglas and UKIP. He hasn't supported my leadership at all, and he completely disagrees with what has been our main electoral policy, namely that immigration should be talked about frankly and openly, and that we should have proper border controls. So quite why you would join a party with me as leader and with that as our policy and then disagree with all of it, I simply don't know. And during the referendum campaign, he's really done all that he can to basically split the party. And every time we have, whether it's during the referendum or it's a party conference, every single time there's an event, there's an impression of division that is given because he says something different to what I say, and perhaps many of the rest of us say. I agreed with the previous caller from Barnet, who said actually the UKIP grassroots are pretty united, and they are. I saw them yesterday. But unfortunately, what we've inherited here is the kind of culture that comes from Westminster, that comes from the lobby. It is a sort of conservative, nasty, backbiting kind of politics where one constantly briefs the press. And I think this has been very, very against the interests of our party. Added to that, Douglas was a huge cheerleader for Neil Hamilton being rehabilitated and put back into electoral politics, which he's been in the Welsh Assembly. And it's something that I was fiercely opposed to. UKIP's problem is this. 20 years ago, we set ourselves up with a national executive committee of willing volunteers to make the big decisions and to run the party. And that was fine for then, for a grassroots movement. We now have people making these big decisions who've got very little experience of politics, in many cases not much experience of business either, and they are vulnerable to the professional lobbying that career politicians do. And because of that, in many ways, UKIP is slightly paralysed in terms of recruiting new members, in terms of planning for election campaigns. We're not really in a good place. And I think we need new professional management. The new leader of UKIP must not, as I've been for the last year, not be allowed to lead the party and not be allowed to make those big organisational decisions. And I think, this is quite a big moment. It is not my job to tell Diane James what to do, and I will not tell Diane James what to do. I'll do nothing unless she asks me for any help, in which case it's there 100%. But I do think that Douglas Carswell needs to make a big decision. Is he going to support Diane James? Is he going to support the party's agenda? Because if he's going to go on sniping from the sidelines, frankly, it's no good for UKIP. And I don't think looking at him, and he doesn't look very happy to me, I can't believe it's very good for him either. So a party with 4 million votes that only got one MP, but one MP that really isn't doing anything for us or for himself. And I think that is quite a big moment that I suspect will come to a head in short time. As for Mr. Hamilton, well, Neil and Christine Hamilton are enormous fun to be with socially. I mean, as party animals and raconteurs and all the rest of it, they're terrific. But unfortunately, Neil had a very damaging effect on the Conservative Party back in the 1990s. And I don't think his image, leading our group in the Welsh Assembly is terribly good. And we'll have to see what happens there. But it's not something that I endorsed. It's not something that I wanted. But I hadn't got the power to stop it. Because, volunteers on an NEC had decided that Neil was great fun and therefore would be a great candidate. So UKIP does have to make some fundamental changes, some quite big surgery. Some quite big surgery is needed. So back to the question we started the hour with. Is Diane James, UKIP's new leader, right? Is UKIP now the opposition party in waiting? Is it on the verge of hoovering up a lot more Labour votes, and perhaps if Brexit doesn't really mean Brexit, a lot of Conservative votes too? Or is that just a pipe dream? Is it nonsense? Is UKIP's job done? Adam in Sittingbourne, what do you think?
Vice Nigel.
Some chance.
Yeah, well, I hope it does happen. I hope your contribution is recognised at some point, mate, because you certainly deserve it. But
Adam, I think they hate me. I think they see me as being responsible for getting rid of a Prime Minister, a Chancellor, a European Commissioner, and causing what they thought was an unnecessary earthquake in British politics. So I think, to be frank, I'm pretty low on the list.
But pretty high most other on normal, ordinary people's list, I would suspect. But your point about what Diane James needs to do, and is she right? I believe that she is right, but she needs to overcome something you were just talking about just now, and that's Douglas Carswell and the people that back him. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a UKIP member, and I just see Douglas Carswell as a destructive member within UKIP. I see him as a Tory plant and able to destabilise UKIP from within, and he's done a pretty good job at doing it, if I'm honest with you. And I just want one more quick point. I want some of your callers said about this migrant poster that came out during the election. Now, most people with common sense can see that the poster was actually aimed at the European Union's policy of migrants. They failed them by Germany inviting them into Europe through the borders, which people died as a result, and it's failed them and it's failed us. And that's what the poster was about. It was nothing about racist, about colour, about creed, nothing other than that migration policy caused those deaths of those people. And
Adam, you're dead right.
Wake up for that.
You're dead right. And in fact, what the poster said was the EU has failed us all. And just look at that summit in Bratislava yesterday, where now the prime ministers of Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, they are saying to Merkel and Juncker, forget it. We're not going to have migrant quotas imposed upon us through your irresponsible policies. So this concept that the EU has failed us all, failed in terms of its migrant policy, completely failing in terms of what the Eurozone has done to Southern Europe, that is gathering pace. Adam, your thought that I'm not saying Douglas Carrs was a Tory plant, but what I am saying is he's much too close to people still sitting within the Conservative Party. And during the referendum campaign, he might as well have been Conservative, not UKIP, frankly. But what he is doing is he's trying to divide and change UKIP policy. And why you would do that when you joined a party that was pretty clear in what it stood for, I don't really understand. But thank you, Adam, for your call. Next we go to Harvey in Gloucestershire. Harvey, good morning.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
So firstly, you are a god. Secondly, I wanted to know that obviously UKIP took seats from Labour and the Tories in the general election. So can they retain those seats for the next election?
Well, the problem, Harvey, is this, that UKIP is good at winning seats, in European elections when it's proportional representation, winning seats in the London Assembly, winning seats in the Welsh Assembly when there is an element of proportionality. We've managed, despite the difficulties of first past the post, to get quite a serious imprint into district councils and county councils. But the general election problem, Harvey, was simply this. 4 million votes and one seat. Never in the history of British politics has any party got so many votes and so few seats. I've got to tell you, I was feeling pretty hacked off the morning after the general election next year. Yeah. Now, in terms of where our support comes from, there was a sort of traditional view that UKIP supporters were all beblazered Conservatives, and it's absolute nonsense. What we showed at the general election, we've got bite into the Labour Party, we pick up non-voters too. So, our ability is to pick up seats across the board. The question really, Harvey, I think, is not is Labour in trouble? It's obvious that it is. The question is, has Theresa May effectively tried to steal UKIP's clothes? Does she mean it? Or if she fails to deliver, well, possibly, then, we may well find that that a lot of those people tempted by Theresa May come back. Harvey, thank you very much indeed for your call. Well, we've examined that, and we've had all sorts of opinions, some who think that UKIP is going places, others who hate UKIP, loathe UKIP, and think UKIPers are all absolutely beastly and awful. I think the party has still got a great future. I genuinely do. I think Diane James is good. I think she looks good. She's determined. But I do think one or two bits of radical surgery do need to be undertaken. OK, so a new Uber-style service offering patients a private same-day appointment with an NHS GP is being rolled out nationally. So it would mean there's no queues. You can skip it. You can see your doctor, just make a call and go and see your GP of an evening or of a weekend. Trouble is, it's going to cost you £50 to do it, to make that appointment. There are many that will say, I can't get a GP appointment, I work hard, I haven't got time, I need to pay the £50. Others that will say it's privatisation via the back door. Either way, call me on that subject, Nigel Farage, here on LBC. And it all starts next. So a new Uber-style service offering patients a private same-day appointment with an NHS GP is to be rolled out nationally. It would allow you to skip queues to see a doctor. All you would have to do is to pay, and medical care would be available 7 days a week. The plan is to charge patients around about £50 for each appointment during office hours, £70 if you want to go late in an evening or at a weekend. Critics are going to say that it's a two-tier health system. It's a step towards privatisation. Others will say, why not pay £50 to see somebody when you want to? Perhaps that'll relieve the pressure on everybody else. What do you think? Call me now on 0345 6060 973. I'm Nigel Farage. It's all next. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? GP appointments. I honestly think that one of the biggest and strongest arguments during the referendum was around healthcare services. It was on both sides of the debate, wasn't it? The Remainers said that if we weren't in the European Union, we couldn't access the workforce of people that the National Health Service needs, and indeed particularly care, old age care, that sort of thing. And the Leavers said, well, firstly, they said, £350 million a week. Some of them said, I didn't say it, but £350 million a week would go to the NHS if we left the EU, and that would solve many of our problems. But also what the Leavers said that really did work was, why can't you get a GP appointment easily anymore? Reason, not lack of resources in the National Health Service, but a rapidly increasing population that has made things much tougher. And I genuinely believe that a lot of people who made their minds up to vote Leave did so because they could see their local schools couldn't cope, their local GP surgeries could not cope. Now, I've heard, going around the country, all sorts of stories about people wanting a GP appointment and having to wait 2 weeks, which, by which time it could all be over, couldn't it? I know myself that to get a GP appointment means, getting there at 7:30 in the morning for a same-day appointment, queuing up and perhaps getting an appointment, or normally getting one, but for later in the day. And there have always been, certainly in London and the big cities, always been the possibility of getting a private GP. But now, via a phone app, people will be able to pay £50 to get a same-day appointment. Do you think they're going to say yes to that, no to that? Is it a bad sign? Has this happened to some extent within dentistry already, when a lot of people now go private? For my own part, I have to say that I have paid money to go and see GPs at short notice, working in London. Indeed, it was a private GP appointment in 1986, when I was in a bad way, that referred me straight to an ultrasound scan that had me on the operating table the next day with a malignant tumour. So I personally haven't got an objection to paying money to get a medical appointment. It perhaps helped to save my life. And I also think if people pay to see somebody, that should surely relieve the pressure on those that can't afford to pay to get the services. That's what I think, but I'm prepared to be persuaded that I'm wrong and selfish. I'm prepared to be persuaded that actually this is privatisation via the back door. James in Yorkshire, what do you think? Good morning.
Hi, morning, Nigel. Me personally, if I'm allowed to say, I would actually privatise the whole thing.
Would you?
Yeah. I've paid an awful lot of money, Nigel, over the last 7 years since I started working for the National Health Service. I've seen my GP twice, and I've been to an A&E once when I was drunk about 6 years ago. And that's the only time. But if you actually add up what I've contributed, now, if the population of this country carries on and we're not going to import doctors or start training more doctors, then we've got no choice but to move towards some form of privatisation, because we cannot keep going.
So you would be happy, James? You would be happy? You'd be happy to pay 50 quid to get a same-day appointment? Is that what you're saying?
That would be absolutely fantastic. Absolutely perfect. I'd love that. If I didn't have to pay if I didn't see my payslip, every national insurance...
James, stay on the line there a second. You've given a very strong view on this, and I've just got somebody who might counter that and sort of see how you you react to it. So just stay with me for a moment. And we move to Fran in the New Forest. Fran, good morning.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I disagree with him entirely. What about the poor people that can't actually afford to pay £50 and have paid their national insurance all their lives, like myself?
Yes.
And I needed to see a specialist. 2 months ago, I was referred to one, so I phoned up my my NHS hospital to try and get an appointment, and I was told the 12th of April 2017. And I couldn't believe it.
Gosh.
So, unfortunately, I had to go privately. I didn't want to because I've paid my national insurance. I've paid my tax. I have been a taxpayer for over 45 years.
But you could afford it, Fran, yeah? I
couldn't afford it. That was the
okay,
point.
fine.
I could spend my money on other things.
Yeah.
And so I had to pay £195 for a private appointment.
So, James, what do you say to that? Fran, who's clearly been asked to wait an inordinate amount of time, is effectively forced to pay to get seen.
Yeah.
So isn't there a danger, James, that if we go down this route, we start forcing more people into Fran's situation?
Well, I would have to say that for instance, if people started having to pay, less people would use it because people would think twice about going to A&E or going to see their GP. But what I would say is this: there seems to be a complete lack of denial. I mean, the population of this country, I remember in the early 90s, I'm just old enough to remember, when the doctor used to come and see me. But when Blair came to power in the late 90s, you could see, I've got family who work in, the National Health Service, and even they're in denial. So it is, again, down to the population of this country. I know people don't like to talk about it. I know people up in York don't like to talk about it, where I'm from. But it is a fact. The population of this country is the reason we have a national health crisis. I just wonder what she thinks about that.
Well, Fran, what do you think about James's comments?
I do agree that it is the population explosion, really. It's numbers. I don't care who comes in as long as they can actually afford to pay for their own medication. We have become the international health service. We are not the national health service anymore. I agree that anybody that actually comes in should have a health insurance, like we have to have a health insurance when we go on holiday. I know from experience, people say, when you go abroad to Europe, you don't have to pay. I know from experience that in Romania, we had our E110, we exceeded the cost on that, and the money was actually refunded by the British NHS to Romania.
That's absolutely right, Fran.
That happens over in Europe.
Yeah, that happens.
That happens. But we're not doing it here.
Well, the other way round, there is a real problem. And that you're right, if you get treated somewhere else, the NHS pay for that. But the level of unpaid bills in this country from other European governments is absolutely massive. So it's not been a level playing field. I think, interestingly, both of you have got some very strong points. Both of you accept that a rapidly rising population means the National Health Service hasn't caught up. But Fran, I think you're with the majority. You want the National Health Service to be free at the point of access to everybody. And if those that have got more money want to cut the queue by paying, that's actually not a bad thing if it relieves the pressure for those that haven't got the money. So I think both of you have actually got very strong points. However, I have to say, I think the view of completely privatising the National Health Service, I reckon that's a minority sport. I think we as a country do believe in the National Health Service. We want to see it be a success. We've all got good stories about the National Health Service, along with bad stories about the NHS. And I do not think politically, the full privatisation of it is ever going to be on the agenda. You could argue that Tony Blair did a bit of it, and he did. He privatised about 5% of it, and I think David Cameron about another 1% of it. But I think, personally, that if people have the money to opt out and to go private, that's a good thing, because it means there's more resources for absolutely everybody else. Michael in Bath, what do you make of this subject?
Yeah, morning, Nigel. How are you?
Good morning.
Well, now, Nigel, you can probably figure I'm from across the water there, but I have served 12 years in Her Majesty's military. I'm very proud to do so, the finest military in the world. But I was back in Ireland there for a few years, and if you want to see the doctor, if you live in a rural area, you pay €50. If you live in the city, you pay 60. If you don't have the money, you don't see the doctor unless you have a medical card. Now, to get a medical card, you've got to be friends with the Pope or in his close circle. So, yeah, now, I'm in near Box, near Bath. They got a fantastic surgery here, brilliant doctors, and they couldn't be more helpful. I had to go for a minor ailment a few weeks ago, and in the reception room, there's an annunciator board, and they put up the previous week's appointments that people haven't bothered keeping. And the number of man-hours that are wasted from people who book appointments, don't bother keeping them, and don't even have the basic civil courtesy to ring in and cancel. Now, in Ireland, if you're sick and you want to see the doctor, you turn up. You can ring in the morning, you'll get an appointment, but if you haven't got your €50, you don't show up. It's as simple as that. I think the national health is brilliant, and I think we're spoiled. I continue to hear people complaining and moaning about it. They don't appreciate it. They should live somewhere else where there is no good medical systems, and then they'd realise how spoiled they are.
So are you saying, Michael, for ordinary people it costs €50 to go and see the GP?
An ordinary Joe Soap like me, if I live down in Cork, West Skippereen, and in a rural area, I had to pay €50.
Wow.
You ring up in the morning, you go in, and you pay the receptionist, and you sit down and you get... Now, if you live in the city where my family live in Dublin, they have to pay 60.
Yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting. But you do raise a very important point about people who book GP appointments and then don't turn up. And I think that's something, Michael, we'll pick up from you and discuss in a moment. So would you pay £50 to see the doctor on the same day? Is it privatisation through the back door? Call me, please, on 0345 60 60 973. This is LBC. It's 11:15. So would you pay £50 to see your GP on the same day? Do you think it's privatisation through the back door? Call me now on 0345 60 60 973. And before the break, we talked about an issue that's become really contentious. So, in France, if you book an appointment with a GP, you have to put down a deposit, a financial deposit. I think it's about €10, but perhaps somebody can call in and help us with that. And if you don't turn up, you forfeit that money. Now, Lord Winston, who is somebody that Blair put into the House of Lords, a healthcare expert, who I'm sure you've seen, very distinctive, big moustache and big hair, and a health expert. And he said a few years ago, he said it's outrageous that so many people book appointments with their GP and then don't turn up. We should do effectively what he said, what the French do, charge people money, and if they don't turn up, dock them that money. Now, you might have thought that was a very common sense approach to what I know for a fact is a difficult problem, and yet it was met with absolute uproar. He was utterly condemned by his own party, by the establishment, and he was told, no, that would be privatisation via the back door. So anyway, have a think about that. Let me know, what do you think? Does it make sense to charge people a small deposit and then refund it if they turn up, or if they can't be bothered to go, perhaps dock them some money? I don't know. Next we go to Judy in Brentwood. Judy, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Yes, you've turned me from a Tory to the Common Sense Party, that's you. After all these years. So I voted UKIP. Anyway, yes, I think first of all, I try and keep away from doctors as much as possible, so it's any bother. You know, but if there is something, and obviously it was for you, you know what, they're absolutely wonderful. I mean, you can get in there that day, and I've found that when I've had other things where you've perhaps been on a waiting list for a mole that needed to be looked after 5 or 6 months, I went privately. It was done within 2 days, and it was all off my mind, finished. And that's what I think money's for, if you've got any. The other thing is, what about the pharmacist? She's fantastic, or he is fantastic. Go and see them. You know, it's a people just traipse down to the doctor for something to do.
So, yeah, I think there are, Judy, what is known, I know, as regulars in GP surgeries. You're absolutely right.
Somebody said to me the other day, they were talking to somebody else, well, have you been to the doctor? I said, she doesn't need the doctor. You know, this will go away. All she needs to do perhaps is go to the pharmacy and get, she didn't need the doctor.
No, and yet there are people who probably really do need to see a GP to get referred, who perhaps find it very difficult to get a GP appointment. I mean, it sounds like your GP services in Brentwood are pretty good. You know, you're able to get appointments fairly easily, Judy, and then if you need something done, you're in a position where you can pay for it, and that's all. I mean, quite frankly, that's a similar position to the one that I'm in. I mean, I'm not in a disastrous position for getting GP appointments. Not easy, but I can get them. But there are so many people out there that simply can't get them. I mean, what do you think of the idea that we should charge people a deposit to go and see the GP, and if they don't turn up, dock them the money?
Well, it sounds a good idea, but it's always going to squash people like my son and my son-in-law, who work and work.
Yeah.
On they're good people earning whatever they're earning, but you know what I mean. They're the ones that are going to have to pay. Like they took away the child allowance for their wives,
Yes.
And the people that don't have any money, they're going to go free again, and all us old codgers, we're going to go free again. It's not a ticket because a lot of us older people could afford to, but we'll be what's the word? We won't have to do it. So I think it'll come back to those poor souls who are trying to get up at 6 a.m. and work for whenever. Yeah,
for whom actually GP appointments are a nightmare anyway, because so many of them are commuters, aren't they? So by the time they get home from the office or the factory or wherever they are, probably the GP surgery has closed. Judy, thank you very much indeed for your call. I get one text here. Nigel, this is the start of privatisation. Why can't I get an appointment anyway? From Gary Harrow. Well, Gary, I think we all agree. Money put into the NHS has not been reduced, but the demand for the NHS with a rising population and with people having higher health expectations has gone up. And a slightly cynical text that's come in here from Jan. But if GPs paid for by us are saying they are already overstretched, how are they available for private appointments? I wonder, Jan. I don't suppose it could have anything to do with money, could it? No, I wouldn't have thought so. I mustn't say that, otherwise I'll get shouted at and howled down. Adrian in Sunderland. Adrian, good morning. What do you think of this?
Hello, Nigel.
Hi.
I'm a doctor in the NHS.
Yep.
And I've got a number of concerns about this plan. I'll try and be brief on each of them because they are rather numerous and extensive. First of all, it's one of the core central beliefs of the NHS, one of the founding principles of the NHS, in fact, that it should be free at the point of need, so that people, when they need to go to the doctor, ought to be able to access the services they require at no cost and at no charge. Now, one of my concerns is that if you introduce a system whereby you are effectively charging people to go and see a GP, that acts as an obstruction, as a barrier to them accessing the GP. Be it £50, £500 or £5, it's still a barrier. And to many people, particularly people really down at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum who literally do not have that kind of money going spare, they can barely afford to put food in their mouth, let alone pay to go to the doctor, it will prevent them going to the doctor. It will prevent them going.
But Adrian, hang on. Yeah. This plan, is not to force everybody to pay £50 to see the doctor on the same day. It's to give people the option of paying £50 to get a guaranteed same-day appointment. It's slightly different, isn't it?
It is slightly different, and this is where I think that we have an opportunity to possibly introduce this, but it has to be done in a very, very cautious and very, very structured way, because we need to be careful that we don't allow ourselves to go down a slippery slope towards making it that everybody
I get that.
This appointment. Now, one principle that I think would be a good idea is, for example, if you want to book in for a GP appointment between the hours of, say, 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. during normal working hours, well, they're free to access, and that's fine. But then say you want to have the option of coming in to see the GP in the evening, then you pay for that. Or if you want to come at the weekend, you pay for that.
Okay, so you would sort of favour almost a sort of a hybrid system here, yeah?
Yes, yeah. I think that would probably be as far as I would ever want to go. That would be as far as I'd ever want to go. But you need to structure that in a very, very careful way.
But for anybody, Adrian...
Slowly but surely through attrition, we don't quickly get towards a fully privatised system.
I get your point completely, that we should not be moving towards a system that compels people to pay. Trouble is, if every evening appointment you have to pay for, anyone working 9 to 5 in an office effectively is going to have free GP consultations removed from them, aren't they?
Well, that's a concern. It is a concern, and I think that these things need to be thought about extremely carefully. One other point I wanted to make, Nigel, if that would be okay.
Yeah, go on. Do.
I noticed that a few people who've come on and commented about this issue have blamed the lack of availability of GP appointments on, I quote them, the explosion in the UK population.
Yeah.
Now, we're not talking there about an explosion in the UK population that's happened since the expansion of the EU in the early 2000s. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a hugely expanding ageing population who are people who were born in the aftermath of the Second World War, in the 40s, 50s, early 60s, who are now approaching late middle age and now elderly and have come into the GP regularly with extensive, complex, very deep problems that take a long time to sort out. Now, they're the people that are putting the pressure on the system. It's not through their fault. I'm not saying that they've done anything wrong by that. Please don't think I am saying that. But I think that's where we need to focus our attention.
No, Adrian, I get that. You know, we've got an ageing population. Also, we've actually got higher health expectations, haven't we? I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a lot more we expect. But
people nowadays want to be able to come to the GP and engage in shared care and shared management and have a dialogue and a conversation. If you look back 30 years or so ago, you would sit in the queue at the GP's office and you would sit there for maybe 2 or 3 hours waiting to be seen.
Yeah.
You'd go in, you'd be seen within a couple of minutes, and the GP would tell you what to do, and you would listen and you would follow his instructions. It's called paternalistic medicine. And the way society has gone, we've moved away from that, and people are not prepared to tolerate that. And trying to get all that accomplished within a 10-minute appointment, which is what we're restricted to, is impossible.
It's tough.
Impossible.
Adrian, thank you. I mean, you know, you can look at the population whichever way you want, but certainly there's at least 10 million more people in the country now than there were in the early 1990s. So it is, you know, it is a big one. I've just got one little tweet that's come in here that I really rather like. Would I pay a bullseye to see the doctor? No way, mate. I'm a full red-blooded Anglo-Saxon Englishman of over 50 and I've paid in since I left school. That's Martin in Rotherhithe, feeling very, very strongly about it. So would you pay £50 to guarantee to see the doctor on the same day, or do you think it's a worrying privatisation through the back door that might force people ultimately to pay to go and see a GP? Or should you leave a deposit when you book a GP's appointment that gets repaid if you actually bother to turn up? Call me now on 0345 60 60 973. This is LBC. It's 11:30. News time now with Moira Alderson. Would you pay £50 to guarantee seeing the GP on the same day? Is it privatisation through the back door? It's a big subject. It matters. Healthcare matters to all of us. Matters to me a lot. I've, through plane crashes, car crashes, illnesses, I had cancer once. I've had pneumonia a couple of times. So, you know, I really have needed to access healthcare pretty quickly once or twice. And I did pay to see a GP back in the mid-1980s who referred me somewhere else, which probably saved my life. So I haven't got a problem in paying, but I would hate to think people were going to be forced into paying. But there's a big outcry in some parts of the country that it takes forever to get a GP appointment. So perhaps for the last half an hour here, can we have a competition, please? Can you please either text us at 84850 or tweet us at LBC and tell us what is the longest time you've ever been told you've got to wait for an appointment with your GP. Please, no fibs. Let's hear the truth. Let's find out what's going on there. And we go to our next caller, which is Paul from Bradford. Paul, good morning.
Hi, Nigel. Firstly, just to apologise, I weren't able to make it yesterday to see you off as leader.
Oh.
Excuse my work.
Right, well, we've all got to work, yeah.
Really sad to see you go, but I do understand the reasons. But, yeah, I mean, for myself, talk about the issue of GPs and NHS in general. I think, there is a overwhelming view that the NHS is in a state of decline. I myself would be quite happy to pay £50 to see a GP. I mean, the longest I've waited to see a GP once before was about 4 days off of 4 months to get an appointment. But I've also seen the other side of the coin. My wife is American. I'm trying to get her over on immigration at the minute, and I've had to have treatment in the States. I think, the argument you made about it being a minority view to privatisation, in a sense, the NHS, I think is actually, having spoken to a lot of people, not as minority as you think. You go to the NHS, yes, you pay for your health insurance, but, you get a private room. You get your dignity and privacy respected. You get a nurse there with you the whole time. Yes, the doctor's still working around many different patients, but you get a much better level of care.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, Paul.
Responder for the ambulance service here, it's, I've seen it, and I would say we all enjoy, the NHS being free at point of delivery, and I would agree that the NHS ambulance service needs to stay that way.
But it seems like, Paul, what you're saying, and indeed what the doctor, the last caller, is talking about, is there's almost the emergence of a hybrid system here, isn't there? Where you can pay for bits of it. As you say, if you're in maternity, you can pay more money to get a separate room, etc. And I can see all of that. And I have no problem with any of that, provided it's not a slippery slope going down a road of forcing people, and that I think is perhaps the concern. But Paul, many thanks indeed for your call and for your support. And an interesting one that comes in here anonymously that says, if you are able to pay for a doctor's appointment and the doctor needs to refer you to the hospital, then effectively you are jumping the queue at the hospital. Well, I guess it's a little bit difficult to argue against that. And I guess you could say that any form of private healthcare perhaps gives you an advantage. And there is a moral debate around that, and I get that. However, the big concern seems to be that so many people who need GP appointments in parts of this country simply can't get them. And we've put the call out. We've asked you to tell us what's the longest you've ever had to wait for a GP appointment. And I still think this argument needs examining. Firstly, that if people are prepared to pay, surely that lifts the burden for everybody else. And secondly, should people pay a deposit for going to see the GP, which they get given back, returned to them if they turn up, but if they can't be bothered, then surely they should forfeit something. And that, I think, is probably, it was something put forward by Labour peer Lord Winston. It was shouted down, but as I know myself, sometimes ideas that initially get shouted down later on begin to look perhaps really rather sensible. Next we go to Darren from Poplar. Darren, good morning.
I just can't understand how anyone's really advocating to pay for a GP. It just beggars belief to me that me myself are sometimes waiting 3 to 4 weeks for an appointment.
3 to 4 weeks?
Yes, 3 to 4 weeks for an appointment. Now, if I can't see a doctor within 3 to 4 weeks, how is that? Living in Tower Hamlets, where we've got some of the most highest poverty in the country, and also some of the highest rich people in the country living in this borough, how is that going to increase my access to see my GP? I mean, I stood in my GP surgery about 3 months ago, and there was an old lady in front of me, one of these ones where she couldn't even lift her head up, pushing a trolley in front of her. asking to see the doctor. The lady behind the counter had turned around and said, look, you've got to phone up. She's been trying for an hour to get through, so she got on a bus to get to... I ended up giving her my appointment that I'd begged for 2 weeks before. Now,
Darren, I mean, this is crazy. How can it take?
It is.
How can it take 2, 3, 4 weeks to get? I mean, by the end of that time, you're either better or dead, aren't you?
Yes, exactly. And these are sometimes just for repeat prescriptions for things.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't get a repeat prescription for painkillers. I've got to go and actually attend to see the doctor. Now, I don't know if that happens to everyone, but I know it was me. And
yeah, no. Well, I have to say, I've thought for a long time that the pharmacist should be able to do repeat prescriptions. I find it really odd that they can't do it. And,
yes, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there is a tablet that I've taken on and off for the last couple of years, and yes, to renew it, I've got to get a GP appointment, which is clearly completely ludicrous. Actually, I can buy it legally over the counter on the other side of the channel. So there are all sorts of ways around this. But Darren, I'm really pretty shocked to hear what the GP situation down in Poplar is like. And I wonder, is there anyone out there, is Poplar the worst place in the country to get a GP appointment? Or are there stories even worse than that out there? I don't know. Darren, I sensed your massive annoyance and frustration, and also your generosity of spirit in giving up an appointment that you'd struggled to get for an old lady that really needed it. You're a proper chap. Well done, Darren. Thank you. Next we go to James in Hertfordshire. James, good morning.
Oh, good morning. I was just wondering, when I heard about this charge thing for the NHS the other day, I think it's aimed just at the English NHS, isn't it?
Oh, well, of course, if you're in Scotland or in Wales, there's no problem at all. There's no need.
This is what I was wondering. We pay in, I think, over £8 a prescription. I can't remember the exact amount now. And I sort of wonder, as a downtrodden sort of English person, we seem to pay more in. It just seems that way. And here we are, again, looking at more charges on top of that. I just wondered, what you thought about that.
Well, obviously prescription charges, James, are slightly separate to paying for GP appointments, but it is, of course, linked in with the same thing. There are some who would argue that actually it is English taxpayers that subsidise free prescription charges for people in Scotland. And in fact...
It certainly feels that way, doesn't it?
One or two London taxi drivers I've spoken to who've explained this to me in no uncertain terms. The Scots in reply will tell you, or not the Scots, no, the Scottish National Party in reply will tell you, but actually Scotland makes a huge contribution through oil revenues to the UK economy. There is, I think, through devolution, some things, whether it's prescription charges or whether it's tuition fees at university, some things are beginning to look, within this United Kingdom, James, very, very unfair, and I get that. But can I just ask you this question? I mean, how easy or difficult is it for you to get a GP appointment?
Well, it's pretty quite frankly, it's an absolute nightmare. You're normally looking at least a week wait if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And it really is a nightmare. And as other people have said, you get 10 minutes. They're rushed off their feet. If it's something important, you don't really get a chance to talk about it properly with the doctor.
So if you were really worried about something was really bugging you, you weren't sleeping worrying about it, would you pay 50 quid to get a consultation with your GP on that same day?
I suppose I probably would, but as other people have said, I can't help thinking we're going down a road. The reason I mentioned the prescriptions because everyone's finances are, whether it's £50 for to see a GP or whether it's three lots of £8 but when you pay for a prescription, it's all coming out of your pocket.
I know. I know. But I worry.
I can't help thinking that people are going to suffer because of it.
I worry, James, that yourself, but Darren in particular, the previous caller. I mean, basically, if he was really worried about something, and it was 3 to 4 weeks to get an appointment, effectively what this system does is forces him to pay, doesn't it? He's actually being pushed, and perhaps you would be too, being forced into pay to see somebody more quickly, to get something that is really, really concerning them, really worrying them, dealt with. Somehow, GP waiting times have to come down. I'm not saying I've got all the answers to that. I'm not sure anybody has. But the question, would you pay £50 to see the doctor on the same day, or is it privatisation through the back door? Call me now on 0345 60 60 973. This is LBC. It's 11:45. Would you pay £50 to see your doctor on the same day? And we've been hearing some horrific stories. Being told that in Poplar, in the East End of London, it might take you up to nearly a month to get a GP appointment, which clearly is absolutely crackers and means the system isn't working. Something has gone very, very wrong. Is it? Is it the massive rise in population? Is it people not turning up for GP appointments? Is it people going too often to the GP? Is it all of these things? Is it we're getting older as a country and we need more healthcare? Either way, it's one of those debates that does spark a huge level of interest. And of course, it's directly linked to all political debate. We talked about health in the referendum campaign. A lot of reasons, a lot of people felt that a reason to vote for Leave was because they could not get a GP appointment, which before was an easy thing to do. And of course, in America, health is a massive part of the Trump-Clinton campaign, with Clinton being ill, Hillary was ill with pneumonia, and Trump producing medical records or medical statements saying that he was probably as fit as an Olympic athlete, which did seem to stretch credibility a bit. So they're now all being asked, candidates are being asked for big elections to show their medical records. I have to say, in my case, if I'd ever been asked, when I used to be a party leader, long time ago now, I've been out of it for 24 hours, but if I'd ever been asked to produce my medical records, I don't think I'd have been able to carry them all. So probably I would have been deemed completely unacceptable for political office, given the amount of time I've spent with doctors and GPs. But it's a subject that matters to all of us. We believe in the NHS in this country. We really, really do. There are some people who say, oh, get rid of it. It doesn't matter. But actually, I think it is something, it's part of our belief system in this country, and it's been so since World War II. We just want to see it better. I think that's what really unites all of us. Next, we go to Mark from Aldenham in Hertfordshire. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call.
Not a bit.
I'm a psychological therapist. I work in primary and secondary care for the NHS, and we provide mental health interventions in GP surgeries.
Yeah.
As you may well know, statistics show that 30 to 40% of all consultations involve mental health. So what my suggestion is, and what we've done is, during office hours, which are 9 to 5 or whatever GP surgery hours are, we offer those appointments in the surgeries free of charge in the borough.
Yeah, I got that.
Out of hours, we have an office whereby we can provide 24/7 services, interventions, clinical interventions, therapy sessions in our offices for a small donation.
A donation? Yeah. What a sort of voluntary donation, or?
Yeah, yes. For someone, for example, who both parents work till 8 o'clock, their GP surgery is closed, but they need some help, they're feeling unhappy, miserable, phobic, whatever the case may be, which we know is rampant in our country due to stress and other related issues. And we offer those appointments. They could come on a Saturday when they're not working. They could come on a Sunday if they're religious and don't want to go somewhere on a Saturday, or vice versa. Or they could come at 9 o'clock at night and have an appointment, or 7 o'clock in the morning before the GP opens, for a small contribution.
It's very interesting, because 2 or 3 callers now, and one even a doctor before, have sort of suggested that perhaps your way of doing things, almost a little bit of a hybrid, if you like, is perhaps the way forward. My only concern, slight concern with it, Mark, is that it is those middle earners, working hard, paying their taxes and national insurance, who, in some of the upper brackets, have already begun to lose child benefit and things like that, who now, it seems, are going to be forced to pay yet again. But perhaps there's no way around that. I don't know.
Well, the answer to that is, of course, those people that typically need my type of service at GP surgeries only suffer from mild to moderate mental health difficulties, which means they're still able to work and function. Those that are not able to work and function are, of course, entitled to benefits and will be seen in secondary care in a psychiatric or psychological facility, and will be on benefits and should receive them whenever. And those facilities are, of course, open 24/7.
No, fine.
And I do believe that you're absolutely right. The NHS should fulfil on its promise that it made in 1948, that services should be free at point of contact.
No, absolutely.
What I'm suggesting is that to get around the politicisation of this whole process, what we can do is we can complement the free services that we should be providing during office hours for those who are a little bit miserable, unhappy, or struggling, or they've lost a job or lost a loved one, etc., and they could come at any time that they want, for a small contribution to the cost of those offices.
Mark, thank you very much, and thank you for what you do. Goodness me, you're in the Cinderella bit of the National Health Service. We talked about mental health a couple of weeks ago, and I know it's pretty tough in that sector at the moment. OK, thank you. Next we go to a doctor, Dr. Dimesh Silva from Hampstead in North London. Dimesh, hello.
Yes, hi, good morning, Nigel. Nice to talk to you.
Hi there.
I'm actually bringing up, I'm one of the founders of Totally. So,
OK, now that's the app, isn't it?
Excuse me?
That's the app that people can use to book these appointments, yeah?
That's right, yeah. So we started this about 2 months ago, and then I know there's a lot of people talking about it, but the last thing that we want is to sort of force privatisation into the NHS.
Dimesh, I tell you what, let's start at the beginning here. Just tell me, in a couple of sentences, exactly how this works, so there's no confusion at all.
So all the appointments that are created by the doctors, they're all supernumerary. So none of these appointments that are created are during their NHS hours. So it should not impact one single bit on the commitments of the NHS clinic. So for example, on a day off, a doctor can create maybe an hour's worth of clinic to see patients that way. The idea behind it is because there are a lot of doctors working part-time, and my feeling was that they're underutilised force, especially with part-time GPs. I think it's quite important that they should have a lot of flexibility around their working times. So, especially with say, for example, I'm giving the example of a female GP. If she's got family commitments, she can create availability from 10 to 11 after she's dropped the kids off. And these appointments are all on top of the NHS appointments. And what I found is that a lot of surgeries do have capacity to give extra appointments, and the space is not being utilised, and the doctors want to work. It's just that they don't. It can't fit in with their lives at that moment.
Dimesh, and I think what you're doing is going to work. I mean, I really do think it's going to work. You know, it obviously doesn't answer the fundamental question of why Darren in Poplar has to wait up to a month to get a GP appointment. I mean, that clearly doesn't answer that. And I think there will be some cynicism too, that doctors say they're overburdened, they're overworked, and yet they've got time, you know, to do this and make money on the side. Yeah. Tell me, when will this actually start?
Well, we've been trialling it for the last month, and the sort of feedback that I've got from patients who've come through is that they're very pleased that they can see a doctor and go through a seamless process to sort of get seen. But no, I can understand the criticism. Yeah.
Actually, Dimesh, we've debated this for an hour. There's very little criticism of what you're doing. Actually, a lot of people think it's a damn good idea. I think it's a damn good idea. Because I paid to go privately back in the mid-1980s. I was referred immediately to a scan and had an operation the next day for cancer. So it helped save my life. I think the only worry, and this is not your department so much, but the only worry is that people should never be forced to pay. But listen, thank you for your call. I would love to have gone to Andy in Leytonstone, who was going to tell me about 173 missed appointments at one GP clinic in the space of a week, and that actually people should pay a deposit to go to the GP, which is refunded if they turn up, but not if they don't. Well, thank you for being with me for the last couple of hours. We talked about the new UKIP leader, Diane James. We talked about her idea that UKIP can become the opposition party and overtake Labour between now and 2020. And I think I told you, perhaps more frankly than ever that I have before, that the top management board of UKIP, frankly, isn't fit for purpose, that Douglas Carswell may be a very principled man, but he's brought an awful lot of division into UKIP, and he must decide to either back this new leader or to go. And then, of course, we've talked about healthcare and the trouble of getting GP appointments. I think, Darren, you were the record, 3 to 4 minutes to get one, and that simply can't be right. I'm Nigel Farage. I've enjoyed being with you, but next it's over to Majid Nawaz. That's what UKIP stands for. We don't, in UKIP, want to pull up the drawbridge. We want to control who comes across it. And it strikes us as being pretty mad that you can allow in unlimited numbers of unskilled people whilst at the same time making it very much more difficult for skilled people from the Commonwealth or elsewhere to come into the country. And frankly, I think there may be some people like you who think it's racist to even talk about this subject. But I promise you, Peter, if you come to a UKIP meeting or look at UKIP candidates, you will see we are fully represented by members of every ethnic community. And I honestly, hand on heart, tell you that all these unpleasant words and names that get thrown at UKIP are simply not true. Well, please stay tuned. I will, later on in this hour, be revealing my thoughts on the direction of UKIP, on one or two of the things I think have gone wrong, on perhaps one or two of my failures as leader UKIP's new of leader, the party. Diane James, says
This is a party,
is the opposition party in waiting. Could she be right? Could UKIP replace Labour as the main opposition party in this country? So please get involved. Call me on 0345 6060 973 or text 84850 or tweet at LBC, and some of you have been doing that already. In fact, one tweeter says, your last caller is an example of a Labour supporter. They don't want the truth. They want their fantasy to be reality. UKIP is always more credible. But Samara Smith disagrees, and she says that UKIP will become irrelevant and disappear. It's a party full of people with extreme views. Most people in the UK are moderate and decent. I don't know, Samara. There may have been some people in that hall yesterday in Bournemouth who had unusual views. I have to say, most of them look pretty normal to me. So where's UKIP going? What's its potential? Good, bad or ugly? Tristan in Chichester, good morning.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Very well. What do you think?
Well, firstly, can I just quickly say thank you very much for campaigning so hard for all these years to get us out of the EU, because I'm one of the few young people that actually wanted us to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate you doing that for us. Thank you very, very much.
The European elections of 2014. So the party's come a long way. The question is, has it run its course, or could it go a lot further? Mark in Leicester is our first caller this morning. Hello.
Morning, Nigel.
Morning.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is congratulations on what you've done in the referendum. 25 years I've voted for Conservative, and the first time last year I voted for yourself and your party. So, that's very commendable. The thing is now, while I see UKIP going forward, is you really need to be rolling out policies on everything else except what Europe are doing. Yes, you're getting there, and you've not finished the job yet getting us out of Europe. And I'm sorry, you've probably had enough of all the backbiting by everybody in your country and in your fellow MPs in sort of Europe. But they've got to start rolling out other things. I don't know UKIP's policies on anything except getting out of Europe.
OK, Mark. Well, you made a comment about backbiting, and later on in this hour, I'm going to talk a bit about that and a bit about some of the internal problems. I mean, UKIP's not unique to that, obviously.
Sorry, Nigel, it's not just... I wasn't talking about internal problems.
Right.
I'm on about the whole country being like the press. I mean, the power of the press is unbelievable. It's people don't realise. When UKIP were coming to the surface about 2 years ago, from being a small party you talked about earlier on, some of the scrutiny of like somebody who was just a little party member was scrutinised as being all sorts of different things, racist, all.
Oh, I know.
Everything.
I know. I mean, But Mark, if you challenge the establishment, you will always take some abuse. On the point about domestic policies, I would say this to you, that the 2015 UKIP manifesto, which was the first one any party had ever had independently costed, did put out a full array of policies. And I think what's really interesting, Mark, and perhaps gets us to this question of could UKIP become the main opposition party in Britain, is that so much of what we've campaigned on, Theresa May's now talking about. You know, we've been the party that campaigned on grammar schools, done it for years. She's now talking about it. We were the party who said the foreign aid budget was too high and not being well spent. Well, Priti Patel is now talking about dealing with it. And on issue after issue, you know, minimum wage, for example. You know, we argued for a long, long time, no tax on minimum wage.
So you pass the first hurdle. But I'm just still,
okay.
I can't understand.
I'm getting somewhere.
All my friends and people who are listening to you, they cannot understand what were you doing standing in front of that poster.
Well, I'll come to that, Peter. I'll come to that.
The wars on country.
I'll come to that. Now, if you give me a chance, now, come on, give me a chance. Now, look, what happened yesterday? There was the UKIP conference, but in Bratislava there was a meeting of 27 heads of state. Okay, and there was a massive row going on. Why? Because Mrs. Merkel last summer said, as many of you as want to come to Europe we can cope, we can handle it. And what that poster showed were people crossing borders, rushing, as southern and eastern European countries started to put up borders, started to put up controls. And frankly, Peter, we can talk about genuine refugees. I have never, ever said that this country should not take its share of genuine refugees. But I think the problem is so many people that are coming are not genuine refugees. They are people, you could argue, seeking a better life. But surely we or the EU cannot cope with people in complete unlimited numbers. And I don't believe, Peter, that making that argument is racist. What do you think?
I just still can't put two together with regards to. I know there is an issue with Syrian refugees, and it's a problem not only UK but the whole of Europe as such. But how can you claim that these people who are genuine refugees escaping war-torn country, and they are trying to save them, they're escaping for their lives, and you stood in front of that poster. And you put in fear into the British people before the vote that these people are going to invade UK and we are fools and so on. And then you change your policy after that. You said, look, oh no, we're not anti-immigration. We just want to have people from other countries as well to immigrate.
No, we've never ever. We've never ever. We've never ever. Look,
you're against the EU immigration, and then on the other side, you're saying you're for other immigration from other countries.
Peter,
people apparently no good for you.
Peter, when I did the LBC head-to-head debate, which Nick Ferrari chaired, against Nick Clegg a couple of years ago. Clegg said, Farage wants to pull up the drawbridge. He's against immigration.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Nigel Farage. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
Yesterday, I handed over the reins of UKIP to Diane James. She's the new leader. In her first speech, she said UKIP was the opposition party in waiting. Could she be right? Could UKIP replace the Labour Party as the main opposition party by 2020? So whether you're UKIP, Labour, Tory, Green, Liberal Democrat, I want to hear from you. Tell me that it's complete nonsense, it's a pipe dream, that UKIP's going to collapse, or tell me actually Labour's in so much trouble that UKIP could plug the gap. Plus, I gave my last speech yesterday as UKIP leader, and I'm going to share with you what I really think about the party, its future, and what needs to be done. So yes, I woke up this morning as the ex-leader, the former leader of UKIP, and I guess after all these years, it might take a bit of getting used to. Maybe not. It's going to be fun. I can do what I like now. Doesn't matter. I can even speak more freely than I did before because I was so constrained, wasn't I, as leader of UKIP? No, I personally feel a massive weight of responsibility off my shoulders, and that job has gone to Diane James. Remember UKIP, the misogynistic party that doesn't like women, and 75% of the votes went to female candidates in this leadership election. She's got a big job to do, but she set out very clearly that she believes the party's got the potential to become the opposition party in this country. Well, Labour's got a vicious leadership election going on at the moment. Any of you that have seen the debates can see that the two candidates are not exactly getting on very well. And it's also true that in the last general election, UKIP directly picked up over 1 million people who'd been lifelong Labour voters who'd switched to it. So I know people will say, well, of course, it's nonsense. I mean, it's impossible for UKIP to overtake Labour. But I would just say this. You know, this party was tiny. You know, all through the 1990s, into the noughties, we'd fight by-elections and get 1%, 2% if we were lucky, and we won a national election. We'd seen the thresholds going up. So I think, Mark, whether you heard about it or not, I think that UKIP's policies have been very successful in terms of shifting the centre of gravity in British politics. The question is, of course, will Mrs May deliver? I don't know. But, Mark, no, thank you very much indeed for your call. Now, get involved. Follow Mark. Tell me what you think. Agree with me. Disagree with me. You can do it by calling 0345 60 60 973, or you can text to 84850 or tweet at LBC. And you can watch the whole of this show live at lbc.co.uk and on the LBC Facebook page and even on the LBC app on your phone. So if you want to have a look at something that makes you laugh, tune in. Peter in Wimbledon, what do you think? Could UKIP replace the Labour Party?
Never in a million years. A party of bigots and haters and hypocrites can be a credible opposition to the Conservatives.
Okay.
And you know it quite well. Your policies, Nigel, are based on hate. You don't offer any solutions. You prey on people's fears, and I don't know how can someone take you seriously. Before the Brexit vote, you stood in front of a poster which showing Syrian refugees escaping war-zone country, saying we are full. And what on earth that has to do with UK membership of EU? You're just opportunist and hypocrite. You married yourself to the EU national.
Right. Sorry, Peter. What's wrong with that? Is that bad then?
No. It's not. I mean, it's not bad. It's not a problem. It's just I can't understand. I'm still waiting for you or your successor to apologise to those people who suffered from rising racist crimes because of your behaviour before the Brexit vote. If people are foolish to believe that you have solutions to their problems, you don't have any solutions.
Well, Peter, I mean, you know, you've come up with a long list of charges here. So would you accept we're not misogynistic anymore? In that, as I say, 75% of our voters in the leadership election voted for a female candidate. So do you think we've got rid of that one?
Well, you can